There's still time to change the road you're on.
Hi everybody, it's Dave the Red Pill Coach, and I'm back. Today I'm going to talk about some behaviorism concepts, and I want to just remind you that I have taken the time to carefully curate the major paradigms that are actually helpful in marriage. I have helpfully skipped over the vast majority of paradigms which are not helpful in marriage. And they're not helpful because so much of marriage counseling is total and complete bullcrap. Marriage counselors are uniformly gynocentric in their orientation, and they also take the time to carefully curate their methods. However, what they curate is not what helps the marriage. It's whatever empowers the woman and disempowers the man. If you think I'm being cynical, I'm not. That's exactly what they do. What they do is they take a man and a woman who are not even having sex because the wife is so turned off by the husband's needy, supplicating, whiny behaviors. He's emotionally incontinent. He's peeing his emotions all over the wife on steroids. And what do? They teach him to be more whiny, more needy, more emotional. Obviously, women all say they want an emotional connection. So, according to feminist dogma and marriage counseling dogma, if the woman is not hot, open, and dripping to have sex, then the man is simply not providing the emotional connection that the woman needs. If you consider this objectively, if you actively watch the results of this advice, you can see it's terrible. It sucks. 60, 80%, I don't know what the current figure is, of couples who go to marriage counseling end up getting divorced. Folks, any other discipline that had over a 50% failure rate would be scrapped. It would be thrown on the junk pile. But it's not. Why isn't it? Because the goal of marriage counseling is not to preserve the marriage. They will openly tell you this, and they will covertly, behind the scenes, tell you they're more than happy to deliberately break up a perfectly salvageable marriage. The goal of gynocentrism is to smash the patriarchy. And that, folks, is also the goal of marriage counseling. Every single method they employ is filtered through the window of, does this increase the woman's power? Or does this decrease the man's power? Does it smash the patriarchy? Look, I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating in any way. This is why marriage counseling fails so often. It is based on entirely ridiculous and demonstrably false premises, such as, men and women are exactly the same and interchangeable. No, they're not. Women know what they want, and they will tell you. Oh, my sides. Yeah, women know what they want, and they will tell you. Okay. These are the assumptions that marriage counselors believe with all their heart. A man can make a woman feel safe and happy by supplicating, being emotionally connected, listening to what she says, and, of course, doing whatever she says. No, you can't. Men don't need sex or physical validation. We're not animals. But, of course, women require constant emotional validation to feel safe and secure. Now, I could go on, and I probably will in future videos, but for now, I just want to focus on what does actually work. I've told you what doesn't work and why it doesn't work. Now I'll tell you what does work, because the methods I talk about in these videos work. And the reasons that they work is that they are based on observation and scientific experiment. They are not based on the feminist presumptions of equality, even though some animals are more equal than others, and that men can supplicate their way into providing emotional security for a woman. Behaviorism is what I'm going to talk about today. Behaviorism does not rely on any assumptions like this. It relies on actual, real-world experiments with animals and with people. But I want to spend a bit more time on behavioral theory, specifically in animals, before we move on to the full theory of cognitive behavioral theory in humans. First, to review, a behavior is something that is observable and measurable and performed by an organism, usually in response to external stimuli. The frequency of a behavior is determined by what follows it. This is an extremely important concept, so pay attention. Behavior is determined by what follows it. If something follows a behavior and increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring in the future, then that something that occurred is called a reinforcer. If something follows a behavior and it decreases the likelihood of that behavior occurring in the future, then that something is called a punisher. So how do you change the frequency of a behavior? Simple. If you want more of that behavior, then ensure that what follows the behavior is reinforcing. Now notice the tweak right there, guys. I didn't say decrease the behavior by punishing. You decrease the behavior by removing the reinforcers to that behavior. You don't usually decrease the behavior by punishing the behavior directly. You decrease behavior by removing the reinforcer because punishment carries with it several problems. The problem with punishment is that it does decrease behavior, but it also increases undesirable behaviors like anger, aggression, hostility, and even, in the case of human females, spiteful disobedience. Constantly punishing an animal is certainly not the way to train it. If you do it enough, once the subject thinks it will be punished no matter what it does, this is called learned helplessness theory, it just lays down and gives up. And more importantly, punishment is not very long-lasting. It is a temporary solution that only works while you're constantly punishing and while you're there to punish the behavior. If you've ever had a dog get in the trash, you know they ain't going to get in the trash when you're standing right there. But go upstairs and take a nap, and you come down, the trash is all torn up. Why? You weren't there to immediately punish the behavior, so it occurred anyway. So instead of punishing the behavior and thinking in terms of what can I do to make it stop, to decrease the behavior, think in terms of removing the reinforcers to that behavior. And it's important to understand what happens when you do this, because the behavior increases at first. If you remove the reinforcers from a behavior, it will always increase first. Why? Well, the subject is trying to get the reward that it's used to. But over time, the behavior will taper off. It will rarely completely end, but it will certainly decrease substantially. So the way to, in addition to removing the reinforcers for the behavior, you also want to add reinforcers for what's called oppositional behavior. In other words, behavior that's inconsistent with the behavior you're trying to decrease. And now this is as effective as punishment in ending a behavior, and it does not have any of the negative consequences. And more importantly, when you do it correctly, the resulting behavior is very resistant to extinction. In other words, the new behavior that you've created, it is not likely to end even when you remove the reinforcers for it over time. And when you intermittently reinforce it over time, it's going to continue. So, that's a lot of definitions and a lot of thinking. Let's bring it into the real world and talk about the real shit that we listen to on this channel. Let's talk about the distressingly common behavior that men would like to reduce. I'm talking, of course, about sexual denials. In behavioral therapy, the first step is to define the behavior explicitly. Here, we define sexual denial explicitly as a hard no, followed by a hard initiation. Very simple. We're not dealing with rolling your eyes or batting your eyes or, oh, maybe we could go upstairs. No, this is you taking the matter in hand and her pushing you away and saying, I don't want to have sex. That's a hard no, and a hard rejection and a hard initiation. This is the behavior. Let's work on reducing that behavior. So we start by defining it. The second thing we do is you have to define the reinforcer for that behavior that is within your control. Let me repeat that. You must find the reinforcer, what is maintaining that behavior, that is within your control. If you search your tortured mind, guys, you will also almost certainly find that the only thing about this denial transaction that is in your control is your reaction to it. You know, in Married Red Pill, we summarize this as do not give a fuck. And that is certainly the best reaction, because by not showing a reaction, you remove the external reinforcers to the behavior. And sad as it is to say, the reinforcer for repeated sexual denial behaviors is very often the rush of power the woman gets from denying you. When you show her your hurt feelings or your distress or your pain or your emotional anguish, you would think, geez, maybe she'll just give me a pity fuck. No. The visceral disgust that women feel at that time elicits a feeling of power and control. And that is extremely rewarding. Unfortunately, this is the only power that men have left. But fortunately, it is extremely powerful. The second she realizes that sexual denials will no longer hurt you, suddenly she starts to get worried. Her little feminine power has been decreased. She no longer gets that spark of pleasure from seeing your hurt face. In fact, she doesn't get any reinforcement at all. You disappear, she's on her own. And all that's left is the empty feeling of not having had sex. Over time, if you employ this strategy of extinguishing the behavior, it will decrease over time. So, to review, define the behavior, sexual denial. Define the external reinforcer, my hurt face that empowers her. Try the experiment. Remove that reinforcer, and you will find the result is the sexual denials increase at first, but over time they extinguish and slowly taper off. So what about backsliding? What happens if you do show your hurt and your pain? You can't take it anymore. Well, what you've done is you have reinforced the behavior of denial. And worse, if you only do it some of the time, you are intermittently reinforcing the behavior of denial. This means you are making it much harder to extinguish the behavior. And I'm telling you guys, don't do it. Don't let them see you sweat. Especially if you do it, sometimes. Because when you do it sometimes, as I say, you're intermittently reinforcing the behavior. You want to intermittently reinforce behavior that you do want. You certainly don't want to intermittently reinforce behavior that you don't want. So you don't want to intermittently reinforce denial behavior. You want to be firm and consistent. But you do want to intermittently reinforce other behaviors like compliance, like being cooperative, things that you prefer. Those are behaviors that you reward. Now, what's a reward? I don't know. That's up to you to figure out, because every woman is different. The one thing that is constant is you. So, maintain your state control, maintain your power. You are the prize, not her. Thank you very much.
I can't do this all on my own. No, I know I'm no Superman.